Okay, good afternoon, guys. I would like to introduce you to William Hemmerdinger, one of the greatest artists of the time. Painter,
Yeah.
sculptor, photographer, and also gladly board members of LELA. Thank you so much, William, to accept, to be our guest, the first guest. And now I will turn it over to William.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity to do this and for the opportunity to experiment with making the LELA art tours. I'll try not to make too much of a mess out of some of the transitions, but I thought I would show you a few things here in the room I'm sitting in, and then perhaps take you to another room entirely, because it's a studio tour. I also have a group of 23 slides that I thought I'd share with you also. And they are very revealing because it shows the work sometimes in production in this room and sometimes in installations in other rooms and places across the country. So anyway, I wanted to do a couple things first. I wanted to thank Vicki and Craig for helping organize the slides. Of course, Susan as president of LELA, and Sakata-san as our founder, leader, and friend to all of us. So my original intention with the 23 slides that I sent to you was to show only work that I was presently or recently involved with. However, there's been a bit of a development insofar as Craig chose to spotlight twice in photographs a sculptural object which is presently reconstructed and in the room with me. So even though the piece is an older piece, constructed between 2004 and 2016. For personal reasons and curatorial reasons, I had to put it back together. And he brilliantly selected a photograph of my studio with the Duxbury Merchant in the photograph. So even though it is not a current painting and it's not a current work, I thought I'd spend a few minutes talking about that project as well. You will see it's hard to miss. It is a sculpture that is 9 feet by 13 feet by 6.5 feet, made out of over 100,000 small objects, ranging from a commemoration from the city of Los Angeles signed by Mayor Tom Bradley to hairbrushes and broken crockery and all manner of things that one might find and use as part of a sculpture. So in any event, why don't we start with a quick studio tour while we have the light? It is roughly 6:15 here, and the sun is failing rapidly. I know it's 3:15 there, but it's 6:15 here. So brief introduction to my studio. I'm sitting in a 3-story post and beam structure that I built in 2005. I built it with my own hands, my son, my father-in-law, my mother, my wife, my daughter, about 400 or 500 other volunteers, and we constructed the studio building. It's 24 feet square, and on 3 levels. The central level is my painting studio. The top level is storage and a drawing studio. It's also other things as well. And then the lower level is a wood shop and area for doing wax castings and storage of various and sundry tools, boats, anything that you might have living in an environment like this one. The environment, I back up against a river that runs from a freshwater pond. It runs about 3/4 of a mile past my property, down past the barn or studio, through a conservation area, which is a couple of 100 acres that belongs to the Water District and exits into Nantucket Sound. So I am approximately 3/4 of a mile from the ocean. And the ocean, as you will discover in some of the paintings and things I'll be showing to you, does participate as a theme in my work throughout the last 4 decades. So that might be of interest for you to know. So why don't I give you the dizzying tour? If you're up to it, you might want to close your eyes as I move the computer, because it could be a little bit like a video of my shoes. But we'll give it a spin here. This behind me is a painting I'm working on. It is 10 feet 6 by 6 feet tall. The other side of the room is a round painting that is 72 inches in diameter. It's part of a project I'm working on for a home in Indian Wells, California. Behind me is the ship, the Duxbury Merchant, that is constructed of over 100,000 objects. Now I'm going to take you for a little stroll. You can see some very nice paints here. Bunch of tools thrown on the floor. Storage. We're going up into the loft. Storage of spars for boats, paintings, things of that sort, and a nice view of the forest outside. So I'm up about 32 feet in the air now, as far as the this landing, and up above most of the trees in the area. They're actually scrub oaks. They're not terribly tall, but anyway, the space also has an exterior work deck that I think you can see outside with the cordwood. Anyway, sorry for that dizzying tour, but you did say you wanted to see a studio workspace. Now, talking about the work that I've been producing here. My work in Los Angeles in the 1970s and 80s, I'm not going to be very historical at this point, because I really did want to talk about work that I'm doing now. But my work in the 1970s and 80s involved abstract painting and collage work. I was showing collages with a group that I liked very much: Betty Zard, George Herms, William Dole, some of the collage artists of Southern California. Was included with some of the beat collagists like Keen Holtz, Bruce Connor, a couple of others I can think of. And then my paintings were being shown with process-oriented artists at Cirrus Gallery. So I was really marching down 2 avenues, assemblage and collage art, and process-oriented painting. I continued both activities. In 1980, the activity of collage went from being paper collage into being 3-dimensional. And it became 3-dimensional specifically because I moved to this area for the summer one year in 1980. And I became interested in the activity of shellfishing or clamming. And when you clam, you often are digging up some beautiful shells from the bay. These shells are often aggregate to an old boot, a bottle, a shoe, something of that sort. And they captivated me. The shells when on these objects reminded me of the collages and assemblage I'd been making using logos and patterns and calligraphic marks and circles. The seashells seemed to take the place of some of the calligraphic marks. So around that time, I started looking at seashells as taking the place of a mark, or being like a fossil. And I started making these bronzes. This is a small 8 3/4 inch diameter bronze with, you can see blood arc shells, oyster shells, crab legs, Atlantic lady slippers, quahog shells. Here we have the remains, the exoskeleton of a spider crab. This was, here is a crab claw, for example. These were made originally on foam spheres covered with the shells and pieces of paper. And then the paper gradually would burn off in the process of making the casting of these. I made them in bronze and cast iron. And of course, from this, I decided that I liked the calligraphic mark or shape that was made by the shell so much that I decided I would make ship models. Hence, I made 9 ships, which I call the Lost Ships, but it's a terrible title for a series of 9 sculptural objects. The last of the ships was the Duxbury Merchant, which I was showing to you, that's in the far corner, and Craig used on the promotional material shown here. So my collage assemblage evolved really from a sense of place. The beaches and found objects that I would find on the beach from here. I continued with paper collages when I would be in Southern California. I'd continue harvesting typography and things that had circles, obloids, things of that sort, and would often incorporate those with photographs of shell shapes and forms that resembled sea forms. Working as a shell fisherman, as I did, I came to enjoy very much the pattern of the ripples that occurred on the surface of the water, and then also the capacity of seeing the reflection on the surface of the water, reflection of the sky, the glint of light that occurs in almost brushy shapes on the surface of the water. And then below the surface of the water, these various levels down to the bottom that would have things floating or streaming through, and circles, obloids, and shapes that reminded me of calligraphic writing. Craig, may I have the first slide, please?
Sure.
Thank you. Second slide. Well, I didn't, well, yes, this was the one I was looking for. But the other things I think I've expressed already. Gratitude to Sakata-san for a lifetime of friendship and the projects he has done and it continues to do for all of us. And I forget what the other sentiment was. We were talking about the works that...
Can you see the slide? I'm sorry.
I can, thank you.
Okay.
Can everyone else see it? Can everyone see it?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
How big is that painting?
You know, I just had a feeling you were going to ask, so I wrote down the sizes.
That's huge.
It's actually made in 3 sections. It's 14 feet by 17 feet.
Wow.
So each section is 3. Let's see. Well, each section is 3+ feet, and then they're put together. You can see I'm about to digress slightly. I don't like to be too historical, but I'm going to give you a little bit of historical background. While I was still in high school, I was accelerated to take drawing classes at Art Center College of Design. And I was becoming fairly adept, not so much at drawing the figures, but at drawing architectural structures, perspective, things of that sort. But in 1969, I came across a book that had a profound influence on me. I'm sorry Sakata isn't here to hear this, but the book is called Avant-Garde Art in Japan. And it was centered pretty much on the Gutai group, but it was authored by Michel Tapi, whom some of you might have met because he came to California often around that time. The book had a lot of what you might call contemporary calligraphy in it, or what also now is referred to as asemic writing or nonsense writing. Some of this brushwork was in fact traditional. Some of it was essentially just brushwork for the sake of brush painting. I became very interested in a couple of the artists, Matsumi Kanemitsu, with whom I would ultimately form a friendship at Otis Art Institute in Los Angeles, and the couple of other artists who I met both around Los Angeles and also subsequently in Japan. It was at that time I started taking Oriental brush painting classes and became interested in brush handling. I was also encouraged to take up brush handling by a famed watercolor painter in Laguna Beach, Rex Brandt, who had been a student of Hans Hofmann. And Brandt took an interest in my watercolor painting and encouraged me to take Oriental brush painting. This had a profound influence on my work. And as you can see here, what this painting has, and this is one of the 3 panels, you'll see the rest in just a moment, are arrangements of brush strokes that crawl from the bottom of the canvas to the top. They're rather free and expressive brushwork. It is not Oriental writing, although it could potentially be mistaken for such, because it's arranged vertically. Does not begin at the top and descend. It begins at the bottom and goes up. And there are many layers, as you'll see. Craig, next slide, if I could. Thank you. This particular piece is from 2013. It's called Thoughts on Kanemitsu. It's a combination of collage and acrylic paint. It is 48 by 68, small piece compared to the other pieces I'm going to be showing to you. Craig, could we go back to that last image for a minute? Great. As an artist, I've been blessed with some partnerships or friendships. And one of the friendships I have is the architect who designs these buildings. And one of the things that we've discussed over a 40-year partnership is the fact that I like for him to design a space into a building where we can put a painting or a group of paintings. In this particular case, he designed a wall space with a niche that is a setback in a two-story stairwell that goes from the main level of a residence in Indian Wells to the lower level of the house. And consequently, he was able to accommodate an opening that is 14 feet 2 inches by 17 feet 2 inches, meaning we had very little tolerance at the top and side to install these paintings. But with some clever engineering and a very talented crew, we were able to install the group of paintings you'll see here in just a minute. Craig, can we put the next one up? Kanemitsu, let's go on, Craig, to the... Here I am working on two of the panels. Behind my figure is a piece of tinfoil, gold foil, that is not part of the painting. I don't know why it's in the photograph, but it does look lovely. But you can see the a detail of the calligraphic marks and arrangements of strokes and bands as I'm painting them on the floor and walls of the studio. Craig, next one, please. There is the finished set of three. That's the full 14 by 17. You can see the 1 inch reveal all the way around. This is what it looks like set back in the wall at the house. The color of the band that goes through is a little bit bluer than what you're seeing there, but I rarely get a satisfactory photograph that captures all of the color in these. So in any event, that's 3 panels, and it's potentially. The next painting up is entitled The Great Room, and it's 9 feet tall by 6 feet, and it's acrylic on canvas. It's part of the family of paintings that I was doing involving calligraphic brushwork that originates at the bottom of the canvas and proceeds toward the top. I try to create hot and cool zones within the brushwork so that when you look at them very closely, you can see many layers of color. In between each application of acrylic paint, I sand them with sanding blocks and sandpaper. Next image, Craig, please. Thank you. This image is a slightly different piece. This piece is 9 feet high by 15 feet in width. And again, this was a custom piece that we wanted to have a artwork that went to within 1 inch of all of the walls above the credenza, meeting the soffit at the ceiling, and then at the side walls as well. It's in a dining room in a home in Indian Wells or La Quinta, California. It's a variation on the artworks that I've been doing from the standpoint that this actually has some of the sea forms and shapes borrowed from sea forms and desert life, all mixed in together in the composition. Next image, Craig. Here I am painting it. You can see that in my studio, laying on the floor, I'm rolling a glaze onto the surface of the painting. The acrylics that I use are made in Culver City, California, Nova Color. I use a material called AC233, which is soluble with water. And I use a mix of pigment, about 1/3, water 1/3, and then the AC233, which is like a Liquitex gloss medium. Okay, next image. Here I am kneeling over a little piece, 7 feet square. Here I am working on a piece that's 7 feet square. You can see the studio can get a little crowded sometimes. That's the Duxbury Merchant over my shoulder. The painting Corazon del Sol is on the floor and I'm painting on it. You can see ladders and other artworks in the room. And sometimes it's tight to walk in this building. But there's a later photograph that will show this particular painting that I'm working on here in installation in a home in Indian Wells. Next slide, Craig. Here is a view of my studio on another day. 2 round canvases. I like to work on round canvases for a variety of reasons. One of the reasons that I like working on round canvases is that a square canvas has a tendency to, I'm sorry, I want to reverse my comment here. A round canvas to me reminds me of the circular oculus windows that appear in medieval churches, and also the moon gates that appear in architecture in Asia. It's as though it's a device for framing the sky. And when you're doing paintings that are about color and texture and a pattern, sometimes having the round canvas or an oval canvas is a real advantage. And these 2 particular pieces, one of which I think you saw earlier when I was walking around the room, the yellow one, there they are on the easels while being painted. In a moment, you're going to see some details of these pieces being done. Craig, next slide, please. This is an enlargement of the small prototype for the 6x6 inch painting entitled For Roland. I decided to take up and create a piece called Corazon del Sol, which I took it up by just mapping out quadrants or sections, and here I'm just lofting it up. The next image is an image of the surface of my paintings. Many layers of glazes go onto the surface, and I try to create a kind of undulation, almost like a skin, so to speak, where you can see some color below the surface and then color that seems to be setting on the surface, and then over glazes of coppers and golds that you'll see on some of these images. Next slide. Here in the upper corner, you can see not only the pulsing or undulation of the various calligraphic marks that are buried in the surface, but then the gold skin that goes over the entire surface of the painting. Next slide, Craig. A version of Thoughts on Kanemitsu that is painted on an oval canvas, and calligraphic marks. Only comment I might make about this particular piece is that you can't really see it, but there's collaged tissue paper on the surface of the canvas, which it could be a technical discussion for another time. The next slide, please. Josh Daub is a canvas maker close to my home here, but he delivers his stretcher bars all the way to Santa Monica. And here is one of his stretcher bars. I think working on these 6-foot round stretcher bars, people get curious, what does the stretcher bar look like? So I thought you might like to see the circular stretcher bar and the joinery that he produces, and then also you'll see some joinery on that oval canvas as well. Next slide. This is the finished work Corazon del Sol, hanging on the wall in a home in California. And then here is another piece going up on a wall, and you can see the strainer stretcher bar assembly of that piece. Next slide. Another view of the piece that's in Indian Wells, the calligraphic brush strokes. You can see a lot more in terms of the many, many layers of differing colors of calligraphic strokes. Next, please. Here is an image of a piece for a house in Redondo Beach, California. It's a 10-foot 6 by 6 foot painting in production in my studio. The individual applications of the blue color over the yellow was done using paint applied to saran wrap, and then the saran wrap was in fact printed to the canvas and then overglazed. It's underpainting, but it helps me get a kind of variegated pattern under the overglazes. Next slide. Oval stretcher bar. You can see once again the fantastic joinery that Josh brings to me when he brings an oval or a round canvas bar to me. So anyway, next slide. Another view of my studio with, I think those are orchids in the foreground, or gladiolas. Painting that was being done for a residence in Los Angeles. Once again, here I'm incorporating some triangle shapes to the structure of the composition, similar to the piece Bardays that was in that residence in Indian Wells, or La Quinta. Next slide, please. Here is the sketch for the piece. The sketch is on what would be my right, and it's painted on paper. Then the piece that's being painted is on the left. The sketch is 119 inches by 48. The final painting was 10-foot 6 in length by 6 feet high. Next slide, Craig. Another view of my studio. I'm rushing through these because I think I might lose if I were to lose you again. Nonetheless, a view of my studio with various canvases and stretcher bars. What it grabs my attention here are two things. There are two paintings there on the background, on the back wall from 2007 that have calligraphic shapes or forms of sea forms that are actually taking the place of my calligraphic marks or brush work. So the mermaid's purse and the conch shell and a couple of the other scallop shells are taking the place of a circle or an obloid or a calligraphic mark. The other thing that is interesting to me about this image, because it goes to our common recent experience, is I painted a set of 75 watercolors during the pandemic, and there are some of them on the floor. Every day I would start another set of watercolors, and you can see some of them on the floor in the studio. I'd just paint, lay them out on the floor, come back to them later on and work on them again. Some of them are still not finished. Others, one of them was included in the show in Nagasaki last year. The others are in various stages of completion. Craig, I think that's all of the images of my studio.
That's it. Yeah.
Do we have questions or?
Anybody, guys? Anybody?
Yeah, I have a question. All these humongous paintings, which I love the idea of the glazing and the layers. I really, really like that. I'm sorry we don't have any details. I want to kind of get close to them. But so does the architect build the space and then the client wants a painting that goes into that space and then you do the painting, but do they tell you what they want? And
Actually, Marilyn, what has happened over time is that I've built this relationship with the architect where he has examples of various styles of work that I've done or I like to do. And then he will show those examples to the client. And he'll often say, I'd like to do a wall niche in your living room or hallway where I make a setback and create an area into which William will make a painting that looks like or has the same style as a certain pattern that they like and approve. So he has, shall we say, 4 or 5 different lexicons or sets of sketches that we work off of. There will be times when those things kind of evolve over time. The homeowner may decide that they don't like the idea they originally approved and we might need to alter it. But I'm not opposed to that. My ego's not involved. I want to make them happy. And so if it's necessary to do some adjusting of a concept in order to be part of an architectural team, I have no issues with adjusting the idea to the space. But yeah, it is part, to answer your question, it is part of being a design team that involves not only the owner, but the architect who also functions as the interior designer. And then of course I'm executing the idea. He never comes back to me with asking me to paint cupids. So he has kind of an idea of what I would be willing to do. I'm sorry, I spoke over you. What you were going to ask a question?
I was going to say that the spaces very much enhanced the artwork. And there was that one painting, the vertical painting with the lights around it, and it had a glow. The painting had a glow, and then the lights around it kind of made it like an altar or something. You know which one I mean? And
that piece is called Bardet. It's in a dining room in La Quinta. Thank you. It does kind of glow.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It's just, I'm so impressed on how the architect and your artwork are, you know, they dialogue with each other. They fit each other so beautifully.
Thank you. We've been working together at this since roughly 1980.
Wow.
So we kind of know what the other one wants to accomplish.
Well, it's fabulous.
Thanks.
William, I have a question. If I'm not mistaken, you have some works at the Getty Museum also, huh?
In terms of my personal work?
Yes.
What the Getty has that I would call one of my artworks is a handmade book.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, in 1980, I did a series. Throughout the 70s, I'd been making collages using a letterpress printing press, what is called a clamshell press that I used with movable type. And I also published a series of small handmade books in limited editions. And the Getty has one of those. That particular book was called Cosmos. And there were 200 versions of it. Tate Gallery in London has one. The Barbara Hepworth Museum, the National Library of Canada in Ottawa has a version of it. Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris has one. So the 200 copies of the book have been widely distributed over the last 40 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
You know, thank you for saying that, but I didn't do much.
That's as far as I know, William, is an honor to have you in Lila as even as a board member. Honestly, you are one of the greatest artists, and it's just an honor to have you with us.
Thank you. It's my honor. It's my pleasure. Anything else? Any other questions?
When you finish a piece like the giant oval or the really huge ones, and they come back to California, do you have to ship them back? Is there special shipping you do? Put them on a boat?
Yeah, I know. Wouldn't that be fun? I used to use commercial shipper, and there are many of them on the East Coast. But now the person who makes the stretcher bars for me has agreed very generously to pick up the works and deliver them and install them in California. So he has essentially joined our team to execute the ideas and deliver them and put them on the wall.
Wow.
in the homes. He has a van that's perfect for moving the artwork after he. So our protocol seems to be I order the stretcher bar or with the architect I order the stretcher bar. The stretcher bar is made, brought to me. I paint it in the studio over a 3-month period, and then at the end of 3 months he comes, picks it up, puts it in his truck, and drives it to California and hangs it on the wall.
Very good. Do you have
it's all a kind of elaborate undertaking, but we only do it 4 or 5 times a year. And so as long as we have the budget to do it, if we don't have a budget for it, obviously we can't do it. But fortunately, the architect I've been working with has clientele that have kind of clear ideas about what they would like to accomplish in their homes. And so it's been a huge blessing to me as an artist to have somebody I can work closely with to execute some of these large projects.
Yeah, it's wonderful. But
Thank
do you
you.
have to put the canvas on them? Do you have to stretch the canvas?
Do you know, I used to,
It's a big
but
job.
I'm now 70 years of age, and stretching a canvas is not something my fingers can do.
Yeah.
I used to hand pull rather than use a canvas puller. And when you hand pull a canvas, it's very hard.
Yeah.
And I don't do it anymore. To answer your question.
Good.
Yeah, I have the canvas brought with the canvas already on the bar and primed too.
Excellent. Wow.
William,
Yes, ma'am.
for example, the 3-panel, huge, amazing, wonderful painting.
Is that you, Dulcie?
Yes, it's me. It's me. Can you see
Hi.
me? I have a question. How long did it take you to complete that masterpiece?
Thank you. The 3-section piece was, I would say, 12 weeks.
12 weeks.
Yeah.
Amazing.
It's I remember Matsumi Kanemitsu told me one time he was very frustrated when he left New York and he came to live and work in Los Angeles. He was teaching at Otis, and he was living on Berendo Street in central LA. And we were at dinner, and he complained to me. He said, "My paints are drying too fast." And he complained that because of the dryness in Southern California, his paints the water would evaporate and they'd dry very quickly. And he was not used to it, having come to Los Angeles from New York City. I have the reverse problem. I came here from Los Angeles, and I need to have dry time between glazes, sometimes of several days. So when I say a painting can take 12 weeks, yes, indeed, it can take 12 weeks, but I often have 2 or 3 projects going at the same time because I have to wait for the pigments the glazes to cure between sanding and then the next overglaze or next glaze.
I was thinking, oh, it must have taken him 6 months or a year. It would have taken me an eternity. Does it come to you as the vision, the intention? Does it come to you through a dream? Do you see it? Of course, artists are very visual, but what moves you? Like, for example, for that particular painting, with that three-piece painting, what moved your whole being into, I know that we have an idea of what we're making, but sometimes paintings or, masterpieces, they take a life of their own. So what were you following? What was your muse?
It's an interesting question. I'm about to tell you a quick story, but it goes to how that set of paintings came into being. They use a kind of multiple atonal palette. And what am I talking about? One day I was teaching in Boston, and I came home on public transportation, and a girl got on the bus and sat down next to me, and she was wearing raw umber and aqua blue. And I thought to myself, now that's an odd combination. And then I took a closer look, and she was wearing green socks and red shoes. And I thought, now that's an odd combination. She had about 15 different colors or hues, many of them secondary and tertiary hues, on her body that night. And I studied her on the bus, and I came home and went immediately to my studio. And my wife said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I have to go pull some colors out of my bin." So I pulled all of the colors that young lady was wearing that night. And as I say, they were all very dissonant groupings of color or pairs of colors. I pulled all of those out and started painting the next day on a piece of scrap paper. And in one of the slides that I showed to you, there's a painting called Girl on the Bus. It's in the background of several of the room slides of my studio that you saw. And that painting is called Girl on the Bus. And Girl on the Bus has been a prototype for that large piece that has the 3 panels, the painting called Great Room, which also was in the slides I showed to you tonight, and I think one other. So my inspiration was not a vision, a dream, anything mystical. It was an
apparition. It came to
a very inspired schoolgirl who reminded me of the way I used to dress my daughter when she was an infant. And my wife would say to me, "You can't take her out of the house dressed like that." Sound familiar to anyone?
Yeah. My children sometimes won't let me out of the house if I'm not dressed appropriately. So yes. But thank you.
So
That's
if you
a
look,
beautiful story.
if you look closely at Girl on a Bus, there's so many dissonant color families. You'd think, who came up with this? It wasn't an act of genius. It was only courage to try to replicate what I had seen on public transportation that night.
But
Anything else? Sure.
Thank you so much, William. It was great.
My pleasure.